and to reflect on that a little bit in terms of, where you started, where you came from. And I'd like to start with you, Parker. Parker was born in 1939, which means, if I can still count, that you were 21 in 1960. You came of age in the middle of America, in the Midwest, in the 1950s. You went on to do graduate work at Berkeley and to become a community organizer in Washington, D.C. in the 1960s.
Right. I think for me, awakening into rebellion was a slow process. Certainly to be born in the 50s in a white upper middle class suburb of Chicago, as I was to labor under the illusion that all was right with the world. My first wake-up call came when I went to Union Theological Seminary in New York City for a year, until God spoke to me and said he wanted me to get the hell out of the church. And so he sent me to Berkeley, of course, where I spent most of the 60s. And that was, a huge education in the streets as well as in the classroom. In fact, more in the streets than in the classroom. And I went there thinking I'd become a college professor. Why else would one suffer the indignity of getting a PhD? But by the end of the 60s, with the cities burning and my heroes having been assassinated, I went to Washington, D.C. and became a community organizer working on issues of racial justice. 5 years later, I realized that I was trying to lead people towards something that I had never really experienced for myself, namely community. And so I went for what I thought was a sabbatical year, but ended up to be 11 years of my life, to a place called Pendle Hill near Philadelphia, which is an intentional Quaker community that's arranged kind of like an ashram, kind of like a kibbutz, kind of like a commune, kind of like a monastery, but sex was okay. And lived there under conditions of radical equality. With a PhD from Berkeley, I was Dean of Studies, but I made the exact same base salary as an 18-year-old coming to cook in the kitchen or work in the garden because he or she didn't know what to do next. And that base salary was $2,400 a year plus room and board. Living under those conditions for over a decade, I think changed me in ways that I am still trying to understand. But one of the great gifts it brought to me in the middle of struggle was an understanding that the value of a person has absolutely nothing to do with status, power, income, leverage. It had everything to do